Ooh, Allison, any advice for media overconsumption? Her advice is YouTube or TikTok getting in the way of goals. Oh, yes. So I'm sighing because I think this is going to be a Q1 goal or Q2 goal for me as well, is to limit the amount of time I'm spending on these types of platforms, because I know that not only are they taking away time from my goals, but they're also taking, like, most of the time, it's not the best mental health for me. Now, I feel like I've done a good job of curating my like home feed on my Instagram for it to be like what I know I want it to be. But then when I find myself, I scroll, my vice is scrolling reels, like, which is essentially TikTok without it being on the app. And that is just like, it is not a good use of my time. Now, that said, what I know is that I'm not going to go to nothing. I know that the answer is not going to be zero. So, my recommendation for you, as with any goal, especially one like this where you can get data, is you've got to start with where you're at. So, know your data to begin with. And if you have an iPhone, it's in there. Like, you already have the data. You could go back and look at how many minutes every single day you spent on YouTube and TikTok. And when I did this goal, was that last year or 2 years ago? And probably what I'm going to do for Q2 is I printed out a calendar. I just found like a free calendar, and I actually wrote the numbers on the calendar. And then I averaged them out and figured out what my average was. And then I started by setting my limit slightly below that average. I didn't try to make it that much better. I just set it slightly below what that average was. And that was my limit. And then once I was consistently like sticking to that without feeling like it was a big hurdle that I had to go through, and it was just kind of becoming a habit to spend that amount of time, I lowered it by 5 minutes or something along those lines. And I did find that separating out the apps was helpful. Like, mine were Instagram and Facebook. YouTube, I guess I do watch a lot of YouTube, but I find that I do it while I'm doing something else. So that one maybe is not as big of an issue for me. But I would lower it by 5 minutes, and then I would work on that until I got to a number that felt good, where I felt like I was at a place that I was still consuming, which I liked, but I wasn't, like you said, overconsumption and having it get in the way of my goals. The other thing that you can do, so that's just kind of like overarching times, right? And limiting yourself on time, is setting other boundaries as it relates to your individual goals, right? So let's say you have a goal for sleep, but you find yourself consuming at night when you know you want to be asleep. You start by try to track the data as best as you can, right? And this is one of the things, I'm literally speaking from like my own brainstorming ideas for Q2. I will get in bed, and I talked about this. Nope, it's in a vlog that's coming soon, but I did talk about it on a live. I have a goal or a time limit for myself that I need to be in bed after she has been asleep for a certain amount of time. That is like my limit. I need to be in bed. Well, then sometimes I will just scroll on Instagram for a long time. And so what I'm going to try to do is start with where I'm at. How many minutes do I typically spend scrolling? Can I lower that slightly? And then set a goal around that. Turn on the timer. And if I listen to the timer, I get the check mark, and then limit it. And again, my goal is not to be at zero. I'm not going to say you're not going to get in bed and not scroll. Now, if you are somebody who that all or nothing could be helpful, and just like, you're not going to be able to limit yourself, you could try that. But I find for most of us, we are better off with saying like, I get this many minutes to scroll. And then once it's over, and I turn off the light, I go to my book, I go to whatever it is that you go to after that. Or are there other limits, right? Do you like to work on your goals during your lunch hour? And so you need to say no social media during my lunch hour because I'm working on my goals, or no social media until a certain time in the morning. Like, set other boundaries that make sense for when it is getting in the way of your individual goals. Okay, I just said a lot of information there. Yes, I wish I just saw who I follow on these platforms. It's when I see the main feed that I get in trouble. I'm the same way. And so But it's like, I know that when I think about that overall time, like if I look at my phone and it says you spent this much time on Instagram yesterday, I know that most of that is that extra scrolling, right? Most of that is not my looking at my main feed. And so I can start working that back by knowing I'm going to limit my scrolling. Yeah, it's eye-opening to see those numbers. I actually have my phone lock screen as a picture that says read more, scroll less. I love that. And yeah, it comes down to what do you want to be doing in place of that, right? Like I gave the example, and it seems like for you, Allison, that's a big goal for you as well. Is it that you want to be sleeping? And then you've got to remind yourself, okay, my goal is to get more sleep. So I need to limit the scrolling at night. Or is it that I want to be reading instead of scrolling? Or is it that I want to be spending time with my significant other or focusing on my kids instead of scrolling? Or is it that I want to be doing literally another goal? I want to be organizing something. I want to be scrapbooking. Remind yourself of what it is you want to do at that time instead of scrolling. I scroll a lot at bedtime, but now for the last 2 weeks, I said phone off at 9:30 and then I lay the phone down. And for some people, like Roberta in this scenario, having an exact time of day can be really helpful. And I actually have, it's funny, I have the lamp in our bedroom on an auto timer now that turns off at a certain time. That kind of tells me like, okay, you've probably been in bed and scrolling enough. Like it's time to like think about going to bed. Does it mean I always put my phone away? No, it doesn't. But for some of us, an exact time isn't always helpful. And because my evenings are not always consistent with a almost 6-month old. So you have to figure out what works for you. And for some people, a set time might work. And for some people, an amount of time might work better. I've stopped scrolling at bedtime and listening to podcasts. It winds me down. I love that. I'll try to be more mindful of what point I switch over to the main feed. Yeah. And again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you to not, or I'm not going to sit here and tell you to cut it cold turkey because that's not feasible for most of us. I know for some people it is. And I was just listening to a podcast the other day where she was like, I deleted TikTok from my phone. It feels so good. And like, that's awesome. Like good for her. And if you can make that work, awesome. But for most of us, for most things, if we completely restrict, then what happens is one day you're like, oh, it's been so long and I've been so good. I'm going to go ahead and just re-download the app. And then you swing the other way and you spend hours and hours and hours and don't even realize it. When what is more feasible and sustainable long-term is that you don't delete the app and go cold turkey, but you cut back to an amount that feels good to you. I love creators like you who have a schedule. It helps me to know when to expect videos. I totally feel that. The people that upload like randomly, I'm like, what? Or like even in podcasts too. I feel like most podcasters have like a set date that they upload. But yeah. No. You do not sound like an addict. And again, I'm not giving exact numbers in this discussion because it's different for all of us. My numbers are not low, and when I think about like all the things I want to do in my life and the fact that I have a baby and a business and how am I spending that amount of hours looking at Instagram? And like, yes, it is work and there's times I'm doing work things, but let's be real, a lot of it is scrolling. And we are all technically addicted to it because the companies are good at making us that way. They know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing and they're making us that way. So do not feel bad because we all struggle with it and it is not helpful most of the time. Don't get me wrong. I obviously love Instagram. It has been instrumental in creating and sustaining my business, but most of the time I spend on it is probably more detrimental than it is beneficial. Life is too short for scrolling. Yes. I did delete TikTok, but I replaced it with more time on Instagram or Facebook. Yeah. Like it is. And so that is a scenario where maybe you're better off saying like all social media. And if you have an iPhone, it is easier because they will let you group apps together and limits that way. For me, I've always been better off limiting individual apps by individual times, but you got to figure out what works for you. That's a great topic because again, this is, spoiler alert, probably going to be a Q2 goal for me. River J, I'm assuming this was just in response to Allison's original question. We are trying to balance our consumption with either journaling, meditating, reflecting, or creating. So if we watch content for an hour, we decided we have to do one of those things for 30 minutes. I love that. It's the balance of the two, right? It's what do you want to be doing instead of scrolling and the consumption.